Sir Brian Souter is a man of deep Christian faith, and unlike most of his counterparts in the worlds of business and finance, he makes no attempt to conceal his beliefs. His witness to his faith has been public and high profile, which has meant over the years he has been targeted, vilified, and criticised. Having stepped back from his involvement in the Stagecoach Group in 2022, he now focuses on his other business interests and the work of the Souter Trust, which continues to support charities and individuals in a wide range of areas. And Sir Brian joins me now. Brian, thank you for joining me and welcome to SPUCTV. As a successful businessman, how hard have you found it to bear witness to your own faith in the world of business and finance?
Yeah, well, that's a good start-off question, Peter. I've not really found it too difficult to do that. I think it must be really difficult for people that are working in state institutions these days, social workers and doctors, and even in government, because there's so many conflicts of interest. So one of the fortunate things about being in business is you're kind of not constrained to the same extent. So when it comes to expressing yourself freely, right? So I've always felt that I should respect other people in the workplace. Lots of people don't share my views, and I respect that. But what I've tried to do is I try to live out my faith day by day. I feel at that sometimes, right? But I've got a perfect example in Jesus Christ. That's why I'm always going to fail, probably, because he is the perfect example. But I want to try to emulate him as much as I can in how I conduct myself each day. And it's interesting, I used to have a company with 38,000 people working for us at one time. And we had a very low number of employment tribunals and that type of problem. We never really had a problem where, there's been so much problem in the workplace with sexual abuse and this type of thing, And we never really had a lot of that problem. All companies have some problems with it, but I think that it's really important that you lead from the front. And I think if you set the tone in the company, that it makes a big, big difference, and other people will take their cue from that. So for me, it's about the rules that we have as Christians, living them out. It's about emulating the role model, who is Jesus Christ, and it's about experiencing the Redeemer that Jesus is and how he can touch and change our lives, because we all need that personally. We can't do this in our own strength. We need God to help us, and he does that through his son, Jesus. So I think the rules, the role model, and the Redeemer are the things that help me to witness for him in business.
A new form of the 3 R's, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously the backdrop to that question is really that we're very conscious that in the last 20 years, in our lifetimes, we've become a very secular country. It's a big change. It's a massive change. Secularism and humanism have grown way beyond what we might have imagined. Do you think we're at the point where we're now too post-Christian to ever come back again and create the wider Christian culture that once was here?
And I think to answer that question, you need to kind of take a step back and have a kind of cold look at what's happened. Will we ever go back to institutionalized Christianity? I don't believe we will. And I'm going to say something that might be shocking. I think that's a really good thing, because I think part of the problem was institutionalized Christianity. And it's interesting, that the churches that are doing well are the disestablished churches. A lot of the charismatic churches, the black churches, there's a lot of growth in churches just now. But it's interesting, it's almost like we are in the post-Christian era, but something exciting is happening, I think, just now. And it's this. It used to be that our biggest problem when we went to share our faith was that we were associated with the institutions of Christianity. And that had a very negative connotations and image for people, right? And the humanists kind of played on that, that we're dead and we're old hat and we're, and I touched on that about rules and role model and redeemer. And actually we became known for our rules, right? And we forgot that our best asset is our role model and our unique selling proposition is our Redeemer, because that's where the dynamism and the power in Christianity comes from. So for me, I actually think what's happened is really exciting just now. And I think we're seeing a rebirth of real Christianity, really Christ-focused. And I think what's happening with the Gen Z, or whatever we would call them, I think is particularly interesting. I mean, young men in particular, we're seeing they are eating more meat. They are they are drinking less alcohol. They are attending church more, 25% increase.
Sales of Bibles have gone up.
Way up. 19% increase in the people that are taking memberships in the National Trust in that age group. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff going on, and which might be concerning to some extent, but a big increase in young men voting for reform. So what is happening is there's a move away from a kind of a woke, which is humanism produced the woke culture that we're in just now. And I think that this generation are really tired of it. I think they see it as fake. It doesn't accord with the reality of what they're seeing round about them. And I think that they now see Christianity as anti-institutional. Yeah. And I think this is going to really change what happens in the future.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting then. I think you're right in your analysis of that. To some extent, though, many of our institutions, and certainly our politics, are still captured by much of the woke mindset. Maybe an example of that is something, political development we're seeing just now, which is moves to try and completely decriminalise abortion in the Westminster Parliament. And at the same time, last week, the Scottish Government accepted a report from a so-called expert group, which was pushing for more or less the same, which would be allowing abortion effectively up to birth. How dangerous do you think these moves are?
Well, I have to say I find it horrific what is happening. And this is what happens when we move from institutional Christianity, which was very boring and not good for the church, right, to institutionalized humanism. So what we now have is what I call liberal fundamentalists. So, as if it's anti-Christian, then it must be good, you know what I mean? And if it has any value basis at all, then it's to be ignored. So we have no basis for our moral philosophy whatsoever. And that's how you end up with potentially crazy legislative changes. We already have the most liberal abortion laws in the world, right? And now we're talking about allowing someone to terminate that child up to 39 weeks. This is not abortion any longer. This is infanticide. And what we're doing is we're legalizing infanticide. Now, if you sit someone down and talk them through this, they will be as just as shocked as I have been about it. It's interesting. Not many people are really talking about this, but if you engage someone in conversation, say, do you realize what this actually involves and what it means, right? They are absolutely horrified because there's still big percentages of people in this country that are very uneasy about abortion.
Well, SPUC did a poll last year. There is no support for this. The idea of the decriminalisation, there's no demand for it. And you're right, no one really wants to see it.
So this is where the equality, inverted commas, of the individual and the rights of that individual become completely twisted, and that unborn child has absolutely no rights until they're actually brought into the world at 40 weeks. I mean, it's appalling, and the reason why we're getting this is that our politicians reflect the changes in society that we've talked about. And they're so caught up in the equality arguments that they fail to see the unintended consequences and the the moral failings of what they're voting for.
And they clearly failed to see there is another person in that equation, even though you don't see them. They're there.
Well, I mean, to think about what they've just passed. I mean, children can survive now at 22 weeks, you know. So the big issue was always that people argued was about the viability of the fetus, right? And now we're ignoring that viability argument, which was the argument the Liberals made, by the way, was about the viability of the fetus, right? That was always the big thing that should decide it, right? Which means that we should be campaigning, even using that argument, that we should be campaigning to bring the number of weeks way down from where it is just now, right? But, you know, to ignore that and say, well, actually, we recognise that this child would live, but we are going to allow you to destroy that child.
Yeah, it is horrific. On that topic, actually, of abortion, another area that's opened up, and it's with very little public scrutiny, is the side effects, the outworkings of the pills by post regime. That was brought in during COVID because consultations weren't possible, and it basically means home abortions. One of the ironies I've thought was, if we go back to 1967 and David Steele's infamous bill, the argument then was we want to end backstreet, as they called it, abortions. Now abortions are happening in our back streets. It's women taking these pills, having it home, having the abortion at home, which has all sorts of horrific consequences. And we know thousands and thousands of women have been admitted to hospital with complications after self-administering the pills. Are we just blind to that as a society, or is it a question of our media don't give us this sort of information?
Well, I think it's partly a problem with the media. It's like this subject's too hot to handle. I mean, it's the classic thing, isn't it? When pro-life organisations have put together adverts that actually demonstrate what this really involves, they get banned from screening them. Personally, I think we make a mistake not trying to redo that, because I think that it draws attention to the reality of what abortion really means. And a lot of folks that have abortions actually have been quite misinformed and misled about what it really involves for them. And there's a lot of regret sometimes afterwards, you know? And so I think, yeah, it's almost like this is the taboo area, you know. We'll talk about drugs, we'll talk about a lot of other things, but we won't talk about this subject.
The reality of it. Well, another one, maybe a parallel one, where we're not really digging into the detail, is the proposals now, again, in the Scottish Parliament and the Westminster Parliament, to bring forward assisted suicide laws. Again, I think on the surface, a lot of people think, well, if someone's terminally ill and if they're in pain, etc., etc. But once you start to dig into that, you see this won't be restricted to people who are terminally ill. Every country that's passed it has eventually pushed it further and further down. It is a slippery slope. And another area is one that we've examined, and that is, what way will the person be put to death? It's some horrific drugs. They're the same drugs that are used to death row inmates. Mm-hmm. And there have been loads of concerns raised about that. How concerned are you that, again, as a society, we're pushing towards state-provided killing?
Well, I think the emphasis is completely wrong. I mean, we've all been through experiences where we've lost people that we loved. And sometimes, you know, we have seen them suffering. And you know, I think that some of the people that are backing this, I think they genuinely are concerned about people suffering. But what I have experienced in more recent times is that when people get good hospice care, and I've lost 2 friends this year that had really, really good hospice care, you know, with the right palliative care, you know, we don't actually need to have that suffering. And so what I really dislike about this is we are channeling all our efforts into state-sponsored killing, and we are ignoring the funding of good palliative care. And we know with good palliative care, you know, we administer morphine and the person gets to the stage where you know they're close to passing, right? But they pass. in their own time, right?
The intention was not to end their life, it was to make them comfortable.
Correct. And I think what we do just now, I think we've got the balance right with that. This is difficult subject, but I mean, I think we have the balance right just now, that they get a morphine drip and it's managing the pain, right? But it's not intentionally killing them, So I feel that once you make this move, that a doctor can administer a death dose, the other thing I really have a problem with, we live life and it's like we're so materialistic and it's like, we get to the end of life and it's like throwing a can away. You know what I mean? I can't help it. My ethos about life comes from Psalm 139. And it's a beautiful psalm. And it reminds us that life is sacred, that it's ordained by God and that He put us here for a purpose. The second thing it reminds us is that life is special and that God sees each one of us as special. And, He's a plan and a purpose for us all. And the third thing that the psalm tells me is that life has significance. And what happens in life determines where we're going to spend eternity. And for me, these three things come together in my view of life. And that life is sacred, it is special, it is significant, it is ordained by God. And so I don't believe that we should be intervening either at the beginning of that or at the end of that. I think medical assistance, yes. Helping people with pain, yes. Some difficult decisions around some of these things, I understand that. But these should be the principles for living that certainly I want to follow.
It's actually a double threat to palliative care, this legislation, because there isn't a conscience protection. So if you're a palliative care specialist, you will be obliged to refer someone to the assisted suicide provider, whether you agree with it or not. And some polls have shown that a lot of specialists in palliative care have said they'd rather leave the profession than be forced to be complicit in that. So we really, so many of the proponents of this legislation say, oh, don't worry, palliative care will still be there. But it's going to be hard to see how it is when there are all these pressures being put on those who are within it.
Well, Gordon Brown has been writing about this issue, and he's pretty strong in it, and he just feels that once we go down this line, it's a fundamental change on how we see human life and the value of human life. But he is really concerned about the palliative care aspect of it, because he has a hospice in Fife that works really, really well. And he has a similar experience to me with relatives and friends. And so we feel it. The temptation here is going to be not to fund palliative care and to fund assisted suicide. And I think that's a real danger. And then this is all about choice. I'd rather choose good palliative care than choose, to be executed.
Exactly. So overall, what it comes to is trying to bring some light often into the darkness for Christians to bear witness to their faith and try and influence society, as you put it originally, more from the bottom up than from the top down in the institutional way. You're a big supporter of the National Prayer Breakfast, and that's an opportunity for Christians to interface with politicians and people in that world. Do you think that Christians should be a bit more confident, maybe even a bit more bold about lobbying politicians and about speaking to them as Christians? Mm-hmm.
I think we should. I think we shouldn't be ashamed of the gospel, and I think we should be more forthright. And one of the things I'm discovering as I get older is two things really. I'm finding that the Lord's helping me to be a bit bolder about proclaiming my faith, actually. And I was in a meeting with philanthropists and senior government people. I won't list who was there. And we're talking about our charitable trusts. And I said, well, what's different about the Souter Charitable Trust? I said, it's not 100% invested in Christian organisations, but a lot of what we do is with Christian organisations. And we use Christian organisations for a couple of reasons. We find they're very passionate. We find we get great value for our money that we put in. I said, and the other thing is this, we believe that the resurrected Jesus has the power to transform people's lives. And I just said it in the format. And there is power in the name of Jesus. And when you're as forthright as that, it was amazingly well received. And people find it difficult to come back because that's what we believe. Why are we holding back about expressing what we believe, right? Because that's the truth of it. That's what makes us different. That's what's made us different. That's how we're making a difference on the world. So I think that's the first thing. I think we should, and the second thing is, I believe that people are more responsive now than they have been at any time in my lifetime.
We've tried atheism, we've tried humanism, we've tried nothingness. Now it's time for something.
Yeah.
Brian, thank you, first of all, for all that you do, for all your work, and particularly for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.